Do you ever wonder if one decision, one reckless, impulsive teenage moment, can echo for the rest of your life? Because for me it did. My name's Bruce. I'm 50 now. A husband, a father, a man who pays his taxes and mows his lawn on Sundays. But 40 years ago, I was a ghost in the system. A 16-year-old ghost who robbed 5 banks and somehow never got caught. I don't mean masks or guns. I never hurt anyone. But I outsmarted the machines. I beat the system before the system even knew it had been beaten. And the strangest part? I don't know why I got away with it. It's haunted me ever since, even now. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night with that same pounding in my chest. That teenage panic. That whisper. They're coming for you, Bruce, but no one ever did. Back in 1984, the world was changing. Computers were new. Trust was high and technology was dumb. At least. Dumber than a bored 16-year-old kid with too much curiosity and too little fear. That summer, my family rented a small cottage in Hyannis, Massachusetts. You could smell the ocean through the cracked windows. The paint peeled off the porch railings, and every night you could hear the faint buzz of a radio from the next cottage over, playing Springsteen or the Police. My parents thought it was a bonding vacation, but I was 16, restless, broke, and convinced the world owed me more than it was giving. My dad was a quiet man, a mechanic who believed in hard work. My mom was tired. She worked double shifts at a diner, her apron smelling of coffee and grease. They didn't talk about dreams. They talked about bills, and I wanted out. That's probably why I noticed it. The ATM screen, glowing in the corner of the Bay Bank lobby one humid afternoon. I wasn't even supposed to be there. I'd followed a friend who was depositing a check. He fed the envelope into the slot, pressed a few buttons, and the machine spit out cash instantly. Deposit with cash back, he said. It's like magic. Magic. That word stuck with me. I asked him, so what happens if the envelope's empty? He laughed. I don't know, man. Probably get in trouble. But that night, lying awake in my creaky twin bed, staring at the glow of the moon through the window, the question wouldn't leave me. What would happen? The next morning, I decided to find out. I opened a savings account at Bay Bank using the cottage address. Back then, no one double-checked anything. No ID scans. No verification. Just a signature and a smile. 3 days later, my ATM card arrived in the mail. A thin, innocent piece of plastic that would change everything. The plan was simple. Stupidly simple. I'd deposit an envelope with nothing inside, request $400 cash back, and wait. The ATM would spit out the money instantly. A few days later, when the bank realized the envelope was empty, they'd think it was lost or jammed. I didn't even seal the envelope. I just slid it in. And when that machine whirred, buzzed, and clicked, then spit out 4 crisp $100 bills, my hands trembled. Not with guilt. With power. It worked. It shouldn't have. But it did. I walked out of that lobby like a secret millionaire. My heart felt like it was going to explode. Every step down the sunlit street felt unreal, like I just slipped through a crack in the universe that no one else could see. But I didn't stop there. Opened 4 more accounts at different banks, all using the same rented house address. Each card arrived within days. Each machine gave me another $400. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, early Monday. By the time the banks realized something was off, the game would be over. And by Monday morning, I had $10,000, $10,1984, and enough to buy a car. Enough to buy freedom. I remember sitting on the beach that night, the waves hissing against the sand, the bills folded in my backpack. The world had never looked so big or so easy. But the rush didn't last, because once you taste that kind of luck, you start waiting for the fall. Every siren made me freeze. Every phone ring felt like a warning. I stopped answering the door. I couldn't sleep, and yet nothing happened. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. The banks never called. The cops never came. The world just moved on. I started to believe I'd gotten away with it, and maybe that's when the real damage began. Because once you realize the world doesn't always punish you for your sins, it changes you. It makes you think you're untouchable, invincible. It took me years to understand that what I stole wasn't just money, it was my peace. For months after that summer, I lived in a strange kind of silence. The silence of someone holding his breath for too long. Every time I walked past a bank, I'd feel that flicker in my chest, and like the walls themselves remembered what I'd done. But no one looked at me twice. No one called. No police at the door. It was like the world had forgotten, and maybe that was the strangest part. How normal everything felt afterward. The money came and went fast. 16-year-old me didn't know how to save, only how to spend. Weed, parties, girls, gas for the car I didn't even own. I bought my friends beer and called it generosity. In truth, it was guilt in disguise. Guilt trying to buy silence, trying to drown itself in noise. But at night, when everyone else crashed, I'd sit awake, counting what was left. The sound of waves outside the cottage had been replaced by the dull hum of a box fan back home. I'd stare at that spinning blade and wonder, what if they find me tomorrow? One night I actually dreamed about it, about the envelope. I saw the machine eating it, the paper vanishing into the dark, and then a faceless man reaching out from the ATM, his hand grabbing my wrist, whispering, "We didn't forget." Bruce, I woke up drenched in sweat. You'd think that would stop me. But once you've broken one rule, every other rule feels a little less solid. By 17, I wasn't stealing anymore, and not like that. But I'd learned to bend the edges of honesty. Little lies, shortcuts, fake stories to get what I wanted. I told myself I was smart, not bad. Clever, not corrupt, but every lie, no matter how small, left a scar. When I turned 18, I tried to open a new checking account for college. The banker's smile faded when she typed my name. She looked confused, then sympathetic. "I'm sorry, Mr. Morrison," she said softly, "but it looks like we can't open an account for you." "Why not?" "There's a flag. Something about a federal list, and that was it. No explanation. No details. Just a look that said you did something you shouldn't have, didn't you?" That was the moment it hit me. Maybe I hadn't escaped after all. Maybe I'd just been marked quietly behind the curtain. My name whispered into the system like a stain that wouldn't wash out. For the first time, the victory felt hollow. Because even though no one arrested me, I wasn't really free. You ever try to run from something that lives inside you? It's impossible. At 21, I found out what had really happened. I was in line at another bank trying again. The manager, a kind older man, pulled me aside. "Son," he said, "you're on an FDIC restricted list. It says banks shouldn't do business with you." "I'm sorry." He said it like he was telling me someone died, and maybe, in a way, something had. I walked out of that branch into the blinding sunlight, feeling like everyone was staring, but no one was. No one ever was. The world just kept spinning, same as always, and I was just another kid with a secret. Years passed. I grew up, got jobs that paid cash, drifted from town to town. Every time I handed over my name for something official, I held my breath. Sometimes it went through. Sometimes it didn't. It's a strange thing. Living a life built on luck. You start to wonder when the luck runs out. But somehow, it never did. By my mid-30s, the record must have cleared. Maybe time erased it. Maybe some clerk deleted it. One day, I opened an account without any issue. I remember staring at that debit card, the one with my name printed clean and unblemished, and feeling something close to disbelief. 40 years later, I'm still waiting for the knock that never came. Sometimes, when I drive past an ATM at night, the screen's glow flashes across my windshield, and for half a second I'm 16 again, heart pounding, palms sweating, holding that empty envelope, like it was a ticket to another life. But I'm not that kid anymore. Now, I see what it really was in desperation dressed up as opportunity. The world moves fast now, the machines are smarter. The honor system's gone, but back then, it was just me and the machine, both naive in our own ways, and even though I was never caught, part of me wishes I had been, because maybe then, I would have learned sooner that luck doesn't save you, it changes you, and not always for the better. 40 years. That's how long it had been since I'd touched an ATM with shaking hands, since that summer of salt air, sand, and stolen luck. I thought the story was buried, sealed under layers of time, bad choices, and ordinary living. But time doesn't bury everything. Some things just wait. It was a cold Wednesday morning. One of those mornings where the light feels too sharp, the kind that makes you aware of every wrinkle, every scar times carved into your skin. I was sitting in my car outside a bank of all places, waiting for my wife, Margaret. She was inside opening a joint account. I already had one, but we just sold our old house and the new one needed a different bank. I'd filled out my part of the paperwork online. Everything went through fine. Or so I thought. When Margaret came out, she had that polite, strained smile she used when she didn't want to make a scene. "Everything okay?" I asked. They just need you to come in and verify something." My stomach tightened. 40 years later, and those words still made me flinch. I walked in, the smell of fresh coffee and printer toner filling the air. The young manager, maybe 25, greeted me with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Morrison," she said, "thank you for coming in. We just had a small issue verifying your history." "My history?" She glanced at the screen. "Just something old in the federal system. It's probably nothing, but it flagged automatically. Old federal. Flagged." My heart started pounding like I was 16 again, standing in that Hyannis ATM lobby with an empty envelope in my hand. "Must be a mistake," I said, forcing a smile. "I've had accounts for decades." "Oh, I'm sure," she said brightly, clicking away. "The system's just being dramatic." I laughed, but it came out hollow. She printed a form, handed it to me, and said, "Sign here and we'll manually override it." Her tone was calm, but my hands, they trembled just slightly as I picked up the pen. As I signed, I caught a glimpse of her screen, a single line of red text, "FDIC watch list. Historical irregularity, Bay Bank, Hyannis, MA 1984. I froze. My chest tightened. It was still there. After all this time, I walked out smiling, pretending everything was fine. Margaret chatted about paint colors for the new kitchen. I nodded, but my mind was gone, trapped in 1984 again. That night, after she went to bed, I poured myself a whiskey and sat in the dark. I hadn't touched the old box in years. The one buried in the back of my closet, under tax forms and photo albums. Inside were scraps of a life I didn't recognize anymore. An old leather wallet, a few faded Polaroids, and one Bay Bank card cracked down the middle. It looked harmless now. Just a piece of plastic. But holding it felt like holding a confession. I stared at it for a long time. Then I laughed. A bitter, quiet laugh, 40 years, and it still had me by the throat. The next morning I decided to do something I'd never done before. I went back to Hyannis. It felt smaller. The roads narrower, the beach quieter. Most of the banks were gone, replaced by cafes and boutiques. But one, the old Bay Bank building, and was still there, though now it was a credit union. I parked out front and just watched. A man about my age came out holding a coffee, laughing with a teller. Ordinary. Simple. I wondered what they'd think if they knew. If they realized the kid who once scammed that place was sitting right outside, wondering why no one had ever come for him. I got out of the car, walked inside. The smell of carpet cleaner and new furniture hit me. A young teller looked up. "Hi, welcome. Can I help you?" I hesitated. Then I smiled softly. I used to have an account here. A long, long time ago. She nodded politely. Would you like to reopen one? I chuckled. No, just visiting old ghosts. She laughed awkwardly, probably thinking I was some sentimental retiree. As I walked out, I noticed an older man behind the counter. White hair, kind face. He looked familiar, vaguely. Our eyes met, and for a split second I saw recognition flicker there. Then he smiled. A knowing kind of smile, and said quietly, "You finally came back." My heart stopped. I froze halfway through the doorway. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" He stepped closer. "You were just a kid. 16 maybe. I was the branch assistant back then." We knew about the missing deposits. The air felt heavy. My throat went dry. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You're not the only one who did it, you know. It was a mess. System glitch, human error, who knows. The bank lost thousands that summer. But we never called the cops. The system was new, we just cleaned it quietly." I swallowed hard. "So you knew," he nodded. "Some of us did. I figured life would teach you more than prison ever could." We stood there in silence. Then he said, almost kindly, "Looks like it did." I didn't know whether to thank him or apologize. So I just nodded, turned, and walked out. Outside, the ocean wind hit my face, cold, honest, alive. For the first time in decades, I felt free, but freedom doesn't erase the past. It just teaches you to live with it. That night, I sat on the beach, the same spot I had 40 years earlier, and whispered into the wind, "I'm sorry. Not to the bank. Not to the system, but to that kid. The one who thought money could buy peace." That night, sitting on that cold sand, I realized something I hadn't dared admit in 40 years. It wasn't luck that saved me. It was mercy. Someone, maybe that old banker, maybe the system itself, decided I didn't deserve to be punished. And that thought terrified me more than the idea of being caught ever did. Because when the world shows you mercy you didn't earn, you spend the rest of your life wondering when the debt comes due. For weeks after that trip, I couldn't sleep right. I kept replaying that man's words. We knew. We just cleaned it quietly. He said it like it was nothing, but to me, it was everything. I started seeing signs everywhere, reminders, echoes. A Bay Bank logo on an old building downtown. A newspaper headline about honor system banking. Even a random comment on the radio. "You never really get away with anything." I laughed at that one, but it stuck to me like static. Margaret noticed I was off. "You're thinking too much lately," she said one night as we ate dinner, the sound of cutlery tapping against porcelain. "Just remembering things," I said. "Good things?" I hesitated. "Not really," she gave a small knowing smile. "Then maybe it's time to let them go." But how do you let go of something that defined you? How do you forgive yourself for the one thing that shaped who you became? I tried to bury it again. Work, chores, the quiet rhythm of middle-aged life. But the past has a way of clawing through, especially when you think it's done. A few weeks later, I got a letter. No return address, no name. Just my own handwriting on the front. At first, I thought it was some prank, or maybe I'd mailed something to myself by mistake. But when I opened it, I froze. Inside was a single piece of paper, yellowed, creased and torn from age, and written in blue pen, in handwriting that was unmistakably mine, were the words, "You owe me." My first thought was, no way. Then I looked closer and saw the date faintly scratched in the corner. August 1984. It was a note I'd written to myself back then. I remembered suddenly like a lightning flash. I'd written it as a joke after the last ATM score, stuffed it in the same envelope as the cash, and said to my reflection in the mirror, "You owe me a better life, Bruce." But how did it get here? The old box in my closet was still sealed. No one else even knew about it. For the first time in years, the paranoia came back. Sharp, electric, alive. I checked the locks twice. I couldn't focus at work. My pulse quickened every time the phone rang. 2 days later, another envelope arrived. This one wasn't in my handwriting. Inside, a photocopy of an old FDIC report signed with my name circled and a note. Time doesn't erase everything. No signature. No clue. I sat there staring at the paper, my mind racing. Was it the old banker? A random prank? Or had someone finally dug up the truth? That night I barely slept. Every creak in the house made me sit up. I started going through my old things. The bank cards, the journals, the photos. Then I found something I hadn't noticed before. On the back of one of the old ATM receipts, written faintly in pencil, "If you're reading this, we remember." I stared at it for minutes. My hands were shaking. Was it a coincidence? Did someone plant it? Or was this just my guilt taking a new shape? One that wrote letters and slipped them into my life when I wasn't looking. Margaret woke up around 3 a.m. and found me sitting on the floor, papers scattered around me like a crime scene. "What's going on?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. "I think someone knows," I whispered. "Knows what?" "The ATM thing. From when I was a kid." She blinked, confused. Then she laughed softly. "Bruce, that was 40 years ago. No one cares about that anymore." "I got letters," I said, holding them up. She frowned, took them from me, read them, and sighed. "Bruce, this is your handwriting." "Not this one," I said, pointing to the FDIC note. She studied it for a while, then placed a hand on my shoulder. "Maybe it's time to forgive yourself." Her voice was calm, gentle, too gentle. And that's when I saw it. A flicker in her expression, something unreadable. A part of me wondered, did she already know? Had she found those old things years ago and just waited for me to face them? I didn't ask. Some truths don't need confirmation. The next morning I burned the letters, all of them, watched the paper curl and blacken in the sink, but the words didn't burn. They stayed in my head, whispering in the back of my mind, "You owe me." That night I dreamed again, only this time it wasn't the machine that grabbed my hand. It was the 16-year-old version of me. He stared at me with tired eyes and said, "You got away, old man," but I never did. I woke up gasping, and that's when I finally understood. The punishment wasn't jail, or shame, or exposure. It was remembering. For weeks after I burned those letters, the house felt heavier, like the air itself remembered the words even if the paper didn't. I kept telling myself it was over, that the guilt had just grown teeth and started biting back after 40 years of silence. But deep down I knew there was something else. Something unfinished, and then one morning I got a call. "Mr. Morrison?" The voice on the other end was calm, official. "This is Daniel Reese with Bay Federal Credit Union. I'm calling in regard to some very old documentation from Bay Bank, dating back to 1984. My stomach turned to ice. "What kind of documentation?" I asked, forcing my voice to sound normal. "It's probably nothing," he said. "But we found some archived account records being digitized. One file was flagged because of irregular transactions. Your name was listed as one of the associated accounts." My pulse spiked. "Is this a legal issue?" He chuckled lightly. "No, sir. Just a cleanup of old archives. I just wanted to confirm that you were the same Bruce Morrison who lived at 14 Ocean View Cottage in Hyannis back in '84? I hesitated. "Yeah, that was me." "Perfect," he said. "We'll mark it as verified. Have a nice day." Click, just like that. Nothing, no threats, no accusations. Just a stranger casually reminding me that the ghosts of 1984 were still on file somewhere in the system. That night, I couldn't shake it. I poured another glass of whiskey, sat by the window, and stared out at the streetlights flickering in the rain. It felt like fate had a sense of humor, waiting 4 decades to tap me on the shoulder and whisper, "Still here." Margaret found me there again, lost in thought. "You're thinking about it again, aren't you?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "They called today." "The bank," her eyes softened. "And? They just..." wanted to confirm something, but it felt like the past was dialing my number. She smiled faintly. Maybe it was, I frowned. What do you mean? She looked down, twisting her wedding ring. A few years ago, when I was organizing the old boxes, I found some of those ATM papers. I didn't say anything. I figured if it mattered, you'd tell me. But when you didn't, I mailed you that note. My breath caught. What? The one that said you owe me. I stared at her. Why would you? Because you've been living like a man waiting for punishment, she said softly. You never forgave yourself. I thought maybe if I made you face it, you could finally move on. I felt my chest tighten. Anger, disbelief, heartbreak all tangled together. You scared the hell out of me, I whispered. I know, she said, tears in her eyes. But I had to. You've carried this ghost for 40 years, Bruce. You're not 16 anymore. You don't owe anyone, and not the bank, not the system, not even that kid you used to be. You just owe yourself peace. The room was quiet for a long time. The kind of silence that feels like truth settling into place. I wanted to be angry. But I wasn't, because deep down I knew she was right. All my life, I'd mistaken survival for redemption. I thought getting away meant winning. But real freedom isn't about what you escape. It's about what you confront. And I never confronted him. That night, I took a long drive, and the kind you take when you're chasing ghosts. The rain was light, the road empty. I ended up back by the coast near where the old cottage used to be. It was gone now, torn down years ago. But I parked by the dunes and sat there listening to the ocean hiss against the shore. I closed my eyes and said quietly, "All right, kid. You win." And for the first time I didn't feel haunted, I felt seen. In my mind, I could almost see him. 16-year-old Bruce, standing by that old ATM, wind in his hair, holding that empty envelope like a ticket to something bigger. He looked at me, older, grayer, slower, and then smiled. Then he said, "You finally get it." The next morning, I called the credit union back. "Mr. Reese, this is Bruce Morrison. About that old Bay Bank record, can I come in? I think I should explain something." He sounded surprised. "You don't need to, sir. It's just an old log entry." "I know," I said. "But I need to." When I arrived, I told him everything, the whole story, how the machines worked back then, the empty envelopes, the cash back, the mistake, the guilt. He listened quietly, nodding. When I finished, he smiled. "Mr. Morrison, I appreciate your honesty, but you do know the statute of limitations on something like this expired decades ago, right?" I nodded. "Yeah, I know." "Then why tell me?" I looked him in the eye and said, "Because I needed someone to know I was sorry." He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he stood, extended his hand, and said, "Apology accepted." As I walked out of the bank, the sunlight hit the glass doors just right, and for a brief moment, I saw my reflection doubled in the glass, one older, one younger, both finally free. A week after I told the banker everything, life went back to its quiet rhythm. Coffee in the morning, Margaret humming in the kitchen, the soft click of the dog's nails across the floor. But something inside me had shifted. For the first time since I was 16, I didn't feel like I was hiding. I thought confessing would feel like surrender, but it felt more like release, like finally setting down a bag of bricks. I'd carried so long I forgot what weightlessness felt like. Started noticing small things again. The sound of leaves scraping the driveway. The way sunlight turned dust into gold when it hit the window. Little moments I'd been too busy, outrunning guilt, to see. One afternoon, I walked past an ATM outside a grocery store. It was sleeker now, metallic, smarter, probably reading a dozen encrypted codes just to let someone withdraw $20. I stopped for a second and smiled. The machine didn't hum like the ones in '84. No warmth, no whir of paper envelopes being swallowed whole, just efficiency, cold and perfect. But as I watched a teenager slide his card in, tap a few buttons, and walk away, I realized something simple and painful. That kid was me once, and every one of us at some point does something we think we can outsmart the world with. We all have our empty envelope. Maybe it's a lie, maybe it's a shortcut. Maybe it's that one moment we said, "No one will ever find out." But the truth doesn't vanish. It just waits, patiently, for us to be ready to tell it. Later that night, Margaret and I sat on the porch. The sky was bruised orange, cicadas buzzing in the dark. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "So how do you feel?" "Lighter," I said. "Like the world finally exhaled with me." She smiled. "Good. That's what you were chasing all along, you know. Not money, just relief," I nodded. "Yeah, but I had to lose 40 years to figure it out." She laughed softly. "That's what growing up is. Some of us just take longer." We sat there in silence, and for the first time, the silence didn't scare me. Because silence, when you're finally honest with yourself, isn't emptiness, it's peace. The next morning, I took a walk along the beach. The tide had come in, leaving thin streaks of foam across the sand. I picked up a small stone, smooth and gray, and tossed it into the water. "Debt paid," I whispered. The wind carried the words away, but I felt them land somewhere deep inside. Maybe I'll always be that kid a little bit. The one who tried to cheat the system and learned too late that the hardest person to fool is yourself. But now, when I think of him, I don't feel shame, I feel compassion, because he didn't need punishment, he needed guidance. He needed time. He needed to live long enough to look back and finally understand what it meant. I turned to walk back to the car, and that's when I noticed something strange. A single envelope half buried in the sand. It was torn, weathered by salt and time. I picked it up, smiling at the irony, and looked inside. Empty. Of course it was. But written faintly across the front, in blue pen faded by years of sunlight, were two words: "Good job." I stood there for a long time. Wind in my hair, sea spray on my face. Maybe someone else dropped it. Maybe it was just coincidence, or maybe in some impossible way, it was the universe's way of telling me what I'd been too stubborn to believe. Sometimes, forgiveness doesn't come from others. It comes from time itself. And when it finally finds you, you don't run, you just let it. I know you wanted cinematic closure, but no story like this is ever truly over. Because maybe the real twist is this: the older you get, the more you realize that life keeps score. Not in money, not in punishment, but in lessons learned, and I learned mine. So now I'll leave you with the question that's been echoing in my head ever since. If you could erase your biggest mistake, would you, knowing it made you who you are today? Comment below. I'll be reading.